Know that all states of being, be they of goodness, passion, or ignorance, are manifested by my energy. I am in one sense everything, but I am independent. I am not under the modes of material nature, for they, on the contrary, are within me. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. All material activities in the world are being conducted under the three modes of material nature. Although these material modes of nature are emanations from the Supreme Lord Krishna, he is not subject to them. For instance, under the state laws, one may be punished, but the king, the lawmaker, is not subject to that law. Similarly, all the modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, are emanations from the Supreme Lord Krishna, but Krishna is not subject to material nature. Therefore, he is nirguna, which means that these gunas are modes, although issuing from him, do not affect him. That is one of the special characteristics of Bhagavan, or the personality of Godhead. Vakam karoti vachalam pungang mangayate girim yat kripatamaham bande Shri Gurundina Taranam Yechaiva Satvika Bhava Rajasas Tamasas Chaye Mata Eveti Tan Vidhi Natvaham Teshu Te Mai. So we're going to go over to our PowerPoint presentation, which is, let's see, I think I just collapsed this. You see that? Yeah. I'm assuming you do. Okay. So, Srila Prabhupada many times. Yes, I do. Sorry. Oh, okay. He would many times use the example about a king. Although, that might be a little bit difficult for people in democratic countries to understand, because supposedly even the president of the country is under the laws of the Constitution. Even so-called monarchs of the modern day are supposed to be constitutional monarchs. Maybe we take it down a little bit of a step. If you're the owner of a business, like let's say the owner of a restaurant or something, that might be easier to understand. If you put all the money into it, you run it, you hire people, you run the whole show, you make all kinds of rules for the cooks and the waiters and everybody else. You got to be on time. You got to treat the guests correctly. If you steal or something like that, it's going to be docked from your pay, and you may even be fired. So all of those are rules that he set up. But because he's the owner and he's in charge of everything, he's not under the same rules that he made. He can go in the refrigerator and take whatever he wants. As a matter of fact, he can hire and fire anybody he wants. He can do whatever he wants because he's in control and he's the owner. So similarly, the personality of Godhead, he's the supreme owner of everything. So even though he sets up this material world, he's not controlled by it. So we've just gone up to this point, chapter 7 to a dozen verses, where Krishna is explaining his energies and how he's manifests himself in this world. There's superior and inferior energies, and he's the controller of all. Nobody is superior to him. So I've got a graph here that I think will help understand, if we can just follow my trend of thought. When Krishna expands himself by his multifarious energies, he first starts out within the causal ocean by manifesting his eternal energy in the form of pradhana. This is the material nature in its most primitive state. It's simply energy. When he glances upon it, by that glance he infuses it with the time factor. And when that happens, it becomes the Mahat Tattva. Mahat means the great. So the Mahat Tattva, when it's infused with time and by the influence of the predominance of goodness. Now, this is not the same goodness that is in the material nature. The material nature, the modes of goodness, passion, ignorance, are contaminated and controlled by the ahamkara, by ignorance. However, there is a pure state of satya, of rajas and tamo, and those are in the spiritual world as well. So in their pure state, they can influence the pradhana to create the mahatattva, and when there's a predominance of passion in its pure state, then it creates another state of the mahatattva, which is called sutra tattva, and when there is a predominance of tamo, then it creates ahamkara. So this ahamkara, the original illusion of the living entity, it comes from that. And from that ahamkara, then it creates the three modes of material nature, sattva guna, rajaguna, and tamoguna. From these three gunas, it creates a certain type of energy where it can manifest other things within this material world. And those are known as Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, and Dravya Shakti. As it's stated in the Katha Upanishad, Parasya Shaktir Vivid, or the Katha Upanishad? Yeah, I'm pretty sure, not the Padma Purana. But anyway, in the Katha Upanishad, it says, Parasya Shaktir Vividaya Shriyate, Jnana Bala Kriya Cha. That the Supreme Personality of Godhead is full of multifarious energies, such as Jnana, Kriya, and I just forgot the other. Anyway, called Dravya. Jnana, Kriya, and Dravya Shakti. Bala, that's right. Bala is the same as Dravya. So Jnana, Kriya, Bala, those are the Shaktis, the energies that come originally from these three modes of material nature. So let's go to the next slide here. So we remember this here. So here we are, Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, and Dravya Shakti. When those energies are put into motion, they create Adidaivic, Adhyatmic, and Adibaltic bhutas, or forms of the living entity. So Jnana, of course, we recognize that. That means the Shakti, the energy of knowing, the energy of knowledge, which originally comes from the spiritual world as part of the spiritual nature of the jiva. It's to be all-knowing, but when he comes through the false ego and they get hit by the three modes of material nature, it turns into this Jnana Shakti. That Chit Shakti turns into Jnana Shakti, and then it's manifested as the Adidaivic bhutas, or the Adidaivic persons. So those Adidaivic persons are the Devatas. Those are controlling deities of the universe. Adidaivic also produces the mind. Then when there's the Kriya Shakti, it creates, Kriya Shakti, it comes from the mode of passion, or the energy of doing, getting things accomplished. Then it becomes Adhyatmic Shakti, or Adhyatmic Klesha, of Adhyatmic miseries. But this manifests, the Adhyatmic person is, first of all, he has intelligence. Then the Gyanendriyas. The Gyanendriyas means the organs of knowledge. This is how we perceive the world, through hearing, through sight, through smell, and through taste, our tongue, rather the organs of perception. And then by prana. Prana is not just breath, but it means the living force, the power to act. the primal power. And then the karmendriyas. The karmendriyas are the like the legs, locomotion, the arms, manipulation, the reproductive organs, and the organs to excrete waste. What did I forget? Hands, legs. What's the fifth? Anyway, whatever. The organs of action. So these all together, both the karmendriya, the gyanendriyas, prana, and intelligence, that all comes from the Adi-atmic person. And then from the Dravya Shakti, from the Bala Shakti of the Supreme Lord, it creates the Adi-Baltic. So those are the Tan mantras and then the Mahabhutas. So the Mahabhutas, of course, are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And those are produced originally from the Tan mantras, which are the subtle elements. So first of all, there's from sound. It creates space. It creates Akash. And then from that, it creates the other elements, the subtler elements, and they create the objects of the senses as well. So remember these terms: Adhyatmic, Adidaivic, Adhyatmic, and Adibaltic. So let's go to the next slide. So every Bhuta, or every form in this world, it goes through transformations. It's, first of all, it's born. It's integrated. It's from simple, basic elements. It mixes, and a form is created. So that form is its birth, or in other words, its integration. Then it has growth. After growth, it stabilizes for quite some time. It's pretty much the same kind of body. It goes through rapid growth in the beginning, and then after that it stabilizes. And during the stabilization stage, it can reproduce itself. And then it starts to gradually degrade, disintegration, and then finally dissolution. So those are the 6 stages of everything within this machine. See, confirmed. Everything that is born must ultimately be dissolved. It goes through these 6 stages: growing, sustaining, reproducing, and then gradually dissolving. Now let's go to the next slide. So we have Rajas, Sattva, and Tama. These are the 3 modes of material nature which conduct everything. You find it within all material nature. Yes, that is a parrot screaming. So Rajas, it produces integration and growth, birth and growth. Then Satya produces stabilization, and then reproduction. And then Tama gradually disintegrates and then finally dissolves, dissolution. So I thought it was interesting when we look at this chart here. Now, by the way, I can't find Shastric evidence for this. Let's see. No, I couldn't understand your last words during the speech. Oh, sorry. I don't know where I left off. But anyway, I can't control the parrot. So this I have not taken from Shastra, so you have to really take it with a grain of salt. But I think this is common sense, that from Rajas we have birth and then growth, integration, growth. From Sattva, stabilization, just like Lord Vishnu is the maintainer of the universe, and then reproduction. And then just like Lord Shiva is in charge of the Tamaguna, and he is in charge of disintegration and dissolution. These are the predominance of these modes, although all of these are within a body. It's just when some become prominent, then you can say they're at this stage. So, because at the moment you're born, you're starting to dissolve. Isn't that something? Starting to die from the moment of your birth. But you look here at Satya, we have stabilization. Now we're on verse 12. If we look back to verse 11, Krishna says, balang balavatang chaham kama raga vivarjitam. Balam, if we go back, let's go back to the other slide. Boom, boom. Okay. So Balam is this Adi-Baltic energy, the Dravya Shakti. So Krishna is saying, Balang Balavatang Chaham, that I am the strength of the strong, which is devoid of passion and desire. So that would be, and then he says, and as far as reproduction goes, Dharma virudho bhuteshu kamo smi bharatarshava. I am sex life, which follows dharma, religious principles. Isn't this amazing? Because usually we think of reproduction, of sex, in terms of raja, or even tama, dirty sex, or sex in order for enjoyment. But what Krishna is talking about is how to find him within this world. So he starts out about stabilization. I am balang balavatang chaham kama raga vivarjitam. I am the strength of the strong, which is utilized to maintain and protect the weak. So you just think about the qualities of the Kshatriya. He protects those that are weaker, and he maintains the state in selflessness because he does it out of duty. So Krishna says, that kind of strength I am. Similarly, the entire universe is being maintained by Bala, by the power of the personality of Godhead that originally comes from him. So that power is sattva. And that we can find Krishna in. When we see that, when somebody does something selflessly to protect others, you think, what a good person. This is right. And when somebody does it out of selfishness, hurts another being, that kind of strength, that is not Krishna. You think this is wrong automatically. So you can find Krishna within the material nature by knowing how to extract. Sorry, that was the word I was looking for. How to extract the Supreme Lord. Similarly, Dharma virudho bhuteshu kamosmi bharatarshava. Even within the act of reproduction, you can find the Supreme Lord. When it's free of rajas and tama, instead of some dirty thing or something just for an enjoyment, when it's done out of duty by following the religious principles. When we have this romantic idea of selfless love, and everyone thinks that that's very, very good. But when people start cheating on their wives or their husbands, or they're going to prostitutes or going to the bar or something like that, that's dirty. We know that intuitively. So when kama is done as a sacrifice to the Supreme Lord, and certainly to be in family life, to have children, that and to follow the religious principles, even in sub-religious principles. Just to be a religious person means to have a good family, to get a job and take care of your family. If you can do that, then you're considered a good person. You're considered religious. So that act of selfless sacrifice, that you can find Krishna within that. So to have sex not for enjoyment or not for some dirty thing, but to have sexual intercourse for sacrifice, you can find Krishna there. So therefore, stabilization and reproduction are sattva. So anyway, I hope that's not confusing. So let's go to the next. I pulled these two verses out of the second canto. This was the last chapter of the second canto, and we read these recently. This is text 8 and 9, and they have to do exactly with what we're talking about right now. So let's read them. Text 8 is, the individual person possessing different instruments of the senses is called the Adi-Atmic person. So that's us. We have the senses of perception and also the instruments of working. So perceiving and working, that's how we move around and do things and perceive things in this world. That's the Adi-atmic person. And the individual controlling deities of the senses are called the Adi-daivic persons. So then the embodiment seen by the eyeball is called the Adi-baltic person. So these are all persons. The Daivas, the demigods, they're persons that are controlling our senses. Then we are persons who are within this body. And then the people that we see by the eyes, those objects, those bodies, embodiments that we see, they are also persons. They are the... Thank you. They're the Adi-baltic persons because they're not their bodies. The spirit soul is inhabiting a particular material form, and what we're seeing is the material form of that person. So all the objects are the Adi-baltics. And then Krishna says all three of the above-mentioned stages of different living entities are interdependent. In the absence of one, another is not understood. But the Supreme Being who sees every one of them as the shelter of the shelter is independent of all, and therefore he is the supreme shelter. So the example that is given in the 11th canto is just like you've got the sun, you've got the eye, the eyeball, and then you've got the object that you're seeing. So there's like from the sun there's light that's coming, and that's controlled by the demigods. And then you've got your eyeball that you're utilizing to see an object, and then there's the object itself. So all three of those are independent. If there is nothing to see, then it doesn't work. If you don't have the eye, it doesn't work either. And if you don't have the controlling deity that's controlling the sun or light, you can't see either. So all three of those, they're all dependent upon each other. But the Supreme Personality Godhead, he creates all of these things, and he's completely independent from them. So in one sense, he's everything because he's created everything, but at the same time, he's completely independent. So from this verse, there's different terms. Here we have Sri Krishna, the Personality of Godhead, and the term here is Sva Shraya Shraya. So Swa means oneself, or here specifically the Personality of Godhead. So, and then Ashraya means the shelter. So Krishna is the shelter of the shelter. He, Sva. Sva, Ashraya, Ashrayaha. So what that means is that the Paramatma is the soul of the universe in three ways. As a Purusha avatar, as Mahavishnu, he's the soul of the entire cosmos, which means all of the universes, the soul of the Mahatattva. Then as Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, he enters into each and every universe, so he's the soul of the universe. And then as Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, the last of the Purusha incarnations, he enters as the super soul in everyone's heart. So in that way, he pervades everything and he maintains everything. So that Paramatma comes ultimately from Sri Krishna. So therefore, the Paramatma is the shelter of everyone, and the shelter of the Paramatma, the source of the Paramatma, is Sri Krishna. So Sri Krishna is Sva Ashraya Ashraya, the shelter of the shelter. So what is the Paramatma sheltering? The Shakti, all of the Shaktis, which are Ashraya. That means shelter the energy has to take shelter to be reposed within the Supreme Being. And that energy is of two types, which we're learning about in this chapter of Bhagavad Gita. There is the para prakriti and the apara prakriti. Para means the superior energy, and apara means the inferior energy. Both of these energies must take shelter of the personality of Godhead. Just like a creeper taking shelter of a tree, we cannot exist, or better, is just like Krishna has told us in the previous verse in this chapter, Sutre Mana Gana Iva. It's just like pearls on a thread. As soon as the thread is gone, everything falls. It cannot exist without the string holding it up. So similarly, the Paramatma holds up everything, and that Paramatma is coming from Sri Krishna. So that is what's saying in this verse, that these energies or these manifestations, which is Adhyatmic, Adhidaivic, and Baltic, they're all within the three modes of material nature. That is ultimately under the shelter of all shelters, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now we go to this, just 2 more slides and then we're done. Oh, just see, I'm going over anyway. So this is a verse from the 9th chapter. So this is coming up again, and it, I think, really embodies the verse that we're going through right now. Yata kasha stito nityang vayu sarvatra gomakan tata sarvani bhutani yatstan ityu padaraya. Understand that as the mighty wind blowing everywhere rests always in the sky, all created beings rest in me. So when Srila Prabhupada says sky, what he's referring to is the Akash. Just as the Akash is situated eternally, always within the air, Vayu, and is everywhere, Sarvatra Go Mahan. So just like the Mahatattva is the greatest of all Mahans, but for us, we have this small example, like I took it down to the owner of a restaurant, maybe a little bit easier, at least for me to understand. So similarly, Krishna's giving us an example that we can see right in front of us, that the wind is everywhere, air is everywhere. You can't live without it. It's all pervading. However, it's situated eternally within the greater sky. And it's situated within space. So similarly, all the bhutas, all the created beings, they're situated within me. We need to understand that. Matstani upadaraya. So there's a very nice purport. This is the last of the slide. Purport to this verse. For the ordinary person, it is almost inconceivable how the huge material creation is resting in him. But the Lord is giving an example which may help us to understand. The sky may be the biggest manifestation we can conceive. And in that sky, the wind or air is the biggest manifestation in the cosmic world. The movement of the air influences the movement of everything. But although the air is great, it is still situated within the sky or space. The wind is not beyond the sky. Similarly, all the wonderful cosmic manifestations are existing by the supreme will of God, and all of them are subordinate to that supreme will. As we generally say, not a blade of grass moves without the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, everything is moving under His will. By His will, everything is being created, everything is being maintained, and everything is being annihilated. Still, He is aloof from everything, as the sky is always aloof from the activities of the world. So I thought this was kind of like a nice picture because, it shows that the clouds are situated in the atmosphere, within the air. That's what's keeping it up. But then you see above that, there's the expanse of space. So even though it appears to be very, very great, beyond that, always, it's situated within space. Similarly, the personality of Godhead, He's always situated above us eternally. And He's controlling everything through the three modes of material nature. But we shouldn't think that just because He's the source of all of these things, that He's under its control. So that's what's very nicely spoken about in this verse. All right, so I went over a little bit, but thank you Yugala Rasa and Kandita Mataji for coming and listening to this. Does anybody want to add anything?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much, Prabhu. Gosh, this was really great. Your slideshow and your visual. I'm sorry if I'm echoing. I don't know why I am. But,
thank you.
Yeah, it made it so clear. The visuals, something that was like, it's very, very complex and difficult to put together. And not only have you understood it, but you've laid it out so that, the diagram is very clear. And I thank you so much. What a treat.
Well, thank you. What a treat to have somebody listen to.
I don't have any questions, but that's all.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Ramananda, it was interesting when you were talking about, very nice class, by the way. When you were talking about, like you gave that example about, that for procreation, Krishna is in that, in the sex. He's if it's not in passion, on ignorance, that. So it's interesting how I just wanted to add. It just reminded me that I came a little bit late. Maybe you also mentioned about this, and of course we all know that in every action can become our action spiritualized, right? That's what Prabhupada gave us. And recently I heard very interesting, Bhaktivedanta Swami was explaining about how we should take prasadam. And I heard many different ways, as a service we should take prasadam. We shouldn't eat, like gobbling up, and just really tasting, materially how we used to eat, and it was very, like he said, if you're gonna eat like that, you definitely, gonna come back and eat like that, because for your own satisfaction. And this is like, Krishna is prasadam, he's there, so we have to actually honor it. But I heard it many times that you have to honor, but recently I heard very interesting, he went in more detail and he said that it's almost like we're doing for Krishna as a service for Krishna by eating prasadam. And he said, like, it's not like we're eating, it's almost like prasadam eating us. And it reminded me again to the similar Ravindra Swarup said about when devotee on a certain stage, he's not chanting, he's being chanted. In other words, he feels that, just it's coming like absolutely naturally and like somebody else is chanting and he just listening. So it was very interesting that the same parallel was also with prasadam. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up, how much you can, the levels of spiritualizing our activities.
I'm just, if I'd add on to that, I'm just remembering that pastime that we read in the Prabhupada memories, how, let's see, I'm so terrible with memories, with names and everything, but anyway, how that one devotee was taking the Maha Prasadam from Srila Prabhupada, and taking his remnants and going around, to all the devotees to distribute, and they would be, looking at the plate and, oh, I just want some of this, and oh, I want some of that, it's like for sense enjoyment, and, not seeing it as, prasad, mercy, to be honored. And then when Prabhupada said to mix it, she just like mixed it all together and began to knead it. And nobody wanted any. And so she said she got to eat the whole thing.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, I remember you read that. That was something, huh?
Nobody wanted it after that.
Wow.
kneaded into, it was like a, like dough.
Uh-huh.
But she relished it.
Wow, that's so interesting. Prabhupada said, wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
He wanted the people to avoid, that
Well,
mood.
yeah, he knew what was going on.
Yeah.
She said it was taking forever to get around to each devotee because, they kind of appear at Prabhupada's plate and, making decisions about what they wanted for sense gratification. Oh, I want this thing here, I want that thing. So, yeah, enough of that. Prabhupada.
Mix everything.
Yeah. I think Srila Bhaktisiddhanta also, I read somewhere that, he would mix up his whole plate. He wouldn't knead it, but he would mix it all up. Or maybe he mixed it all up before he would take. I don't know. But anyway. But anyway, there is that experience and memories,
Nice.
videos, and that devotee in the book.
I don't know if this is an appropriate example, but in Japan, about 500 years ago, there was the most famous and revered swordsman of all time in Japan, Miyamoto Matsuyasi. Anyway, he's legendary, but he was the one who kind of coined this saying that when one comes to a certain stage in his martial arts, in his swordsmanship, it's no longer that he's handling the sword, but rather the sword is handling him. It's like he's an instrument of the sword. So for me, this works, this analogy. So just like the example you were giving that about when you come to a certain stage of chanting, it's just not like you're chanting, but rather Krishna is utilizing you as an instrument.
Yeah.
An instrument to chant, an instrument to taste prasadam. So I always remember, for me it works to have this example about, you're so proficient that you and the sword become one. And it's the sword almost just like utilizes you in order to perfect your art.
Well, it's very common with artists and with musicians and with writers the same.
Really?
Of course, because the whole thing is about absorption, about meditation. So
it's like you're no longer trying anymore, but it's like the art takes over.
That's right, and that's like the how to say, it's perfection. Then you can go into that meditation and it just goes by itself, and then you step back and you look with wonderful, I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. I've totally experienced that too. I mean, I just felt like, when I started painting pictures for, as a service in the DVT art department, there was stuff coming out of me that, I knew I was not materially capable of.
Yeah.
And I just pretty much, I mean, it really was, I could sense it. I could feel like a faucet was being turned on, and it was coming from Krishna. And all the ability and, whatever talent that I thought I had was actually, Krishna's ability. Man, it was just totally him. And it would like flow out from my arm to the paintbrush, and I would just, I made conscious decisions, to move the paintbrush here and there and stuff. But I mean, it was like I became one with that.
You see, and that's why poets and artists like that, they feel like they're getting a little glimpse of the truth, because that's how you can find Krishna. You just get a little glimpse. There's something out there. It's like, when you become one, like selfless with your art or your poetry or whatever. I was reading this article that Sadhaputta had produced about inspiration, And he was saying the same thing, not only about, like great musicians, but the same with mathematicians.
Right.
Without even their own endeavor, the inspiration would just come to them. It wasn't part of their endeavor. It was just like given to them, the ideas. And sometimes they had no idea where it came from because they couldn't figure out how to connect it. Just some difficult mathematical problem they had been trying to solve for years. And then all of a sudden the inspiration comes and they couldn't connect it to how did I figure that out? And sometimes it would take them all their lives and they still couldn't figure it out. But then lifetimes later, other people, hundreds of years later, they'll figure out, oh, okay, now that makes sense, how he arrived at that. He gave example after example of that in mathematics, higher mathematics.
That is so true.
So yeah, it's a type of God realization. That's why they think that it's like almost like a religious experience.
Well, I think it's like you just become Krishna's tool.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you anymore. It's and I guess even with scientists and mathematicians or swordsmen or whatever, it's like you become one with it, and you become like the tool to from the higher source, from Krishna, obviously. But it really doesn't come from us. At least that's we're just I just feel like we're puppets on a string. And, if we just let go of our trying to control everything and think that we're the doers and then let Krishna guide us and, use us, then amazing, wonderful things happen. Because he's the doer. We're just, he's just kindly letting us do some of these things. Anyway.
Nice. Okay. Well, thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ramana.
All glories to
And
Srila Prabhupada.
Kundita.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai.
All right. Oh.
Hi, Paul.